Okay, Parshat Biha'alosecha is one of the busiest parshas in the Chumash. It's one of the busiest parshas in the Chumash. In my mind, the busiest parshas are Bishalach, Biha'alosecha, and Chukas. Those are the busiest three parshas in the Chumash. Maybe in Bereishis, like Bereishis and Noach are very busy. But from Avraham Avinu, the parshas that cover the most events and the largest amount of change are Bishalach, Biha'alosecha, and Chukas. I'll tell you why. Because Bishalach, we go from being in Mitzrayim to being out of Mitzrayim. There's a lot of change involved in that. Biha'alosecha, we go from standing by Har Sinai to leaving Har Sinai. There's a lot of change in that. And in Chukas, you go from the beginning of the 40 years to the end of the 40 years with an empty space. In other words, from Parshas Boy until Pil Koirach. Koirach is a bit of a question, but let's say Til Koirach is 2 years. It's a very short amount of time, maybe even less. Chukas, you suddenly jump to Miriam passing away and Aaron passing away, so you go from the beginning of the 40 years to the end of the 40 years. So it's also a very transitional parsha. So in my mind, the busiest parshas in the Chumash are Bishalach, Biha'alosecha, and Chukas. And Biha'alosecha is a bittersweet parsha. It starts off very nice. It starts off with the Levium. It starts off with Pesach Sheni. But Parshas Biha'alosecha is not. It's a long parsha. It's a lot of very important stuff in Biha'alosecha, including all the criteria. Where in the Chumash is there a discussion about Nevuah? The discussion about Nevuah is at the end of Parshas Biha'alosecha. Biha'alosecha has a lot of good things in it, but Parshas Biha'alosecha, and to quote Rashi, is a parsha which is full of paranias. There's a lot of ill events. There's negative events that happen. 2 or 3 or 4 negative events that happen in Parshas Biha'alosecha. Okay? The first happens in tomorrow's Chitas. The first of the ill events happens in tomorrow's Chitas. Chamishi, Kapitel Yud, Pasuk Yud Aleph. It says in the Pasuk, Vayhi b'shana hashenis b'chedesh hasheni b'eser b'chedesh na'alo ha'onam yal mishkan ha'edus. That means the Jewish people sat by Har Sinai for a year minus 10 days. The Jewish people sat by Har Sinai for a year minus 10 days. So if a year is 55 days, let's say Shana, the Hebrew word Shana, Shin Nun Hey, is 355, right? The average year is, a solar year is 365. A lunar year is 354, 353, or 355. It's either Goishen or Deshen or Shana. In other words, the 3 numerical equivalencies are 3 different words: Goishen, Deshen, and Shana. So they were there for 355 days minus 10. They arrived at Achei and they left the following year Chafir. As soon as the Yidden left Har Sinai, there was the first tragedy. What was it about? They were so happy to leave. It's one of the weirdest things. They were so happy to leave Ayel Moed. They were so happy to leave Har Sinai. You know why? Because they got 613 mitzvahs in 344 days, 345 days. So it's almost 2 mitzvahs per day on average. So that's it, we're done. No more. They knew that once they leave Har Sinai, there's no more mitzvahs. Rashi actually says this a little bit later on. In Kapitel Yud Aleph Pasuk Lamed Hey, he hints to it that the Yidden were so burdened. They got mitzvahs. Mitzvahs. And you have to remember, the way they were taught the mitzvahs is not the way we imagine it. It's not like Moshe came to them and read for the Chumash. Moshe Rabbeinu came to them and showed them how you do a mitzvah. He showed them physically how to, that's what the Rambam writes in Agdam of Pirsha Mishnayos. He showed them how to make tzitzis, he showed them how to make tefillin, he showed them what's a nesrig, he showed them what's a lulav. One of the great questions in Jewish history is, Jews have been so divided, so scattered, so spread out. How come there's no machlekes what's an arova? How come there's no machlekes what's a matzah? How come none of the actionable mitzvahs, how come no machlekes what's tefillin? How can it be? If the Jews had been staying in one place for all of our history, Mele, but we've been so scattered, the answer is because the actionable mitzvahs, the physical acts of doing mitzvahs, Moshe physically showed them. It's called halachos l'Moshe Sinai. Many of those halachos l'Moshe Sinai we later found in the Chumash, so then they were upgraded with kol d'oraisa. But the Rambam writes that Moshe didn't teach out of a book. He gave them a book. And he gave the rules of interpreting the book. But Judaism has three things according to the Rambam. The tablets of the covenant, the Sefer Torah, the scroll of the Torah, and mitzvah. So the Gemara says a mitzvah zu pirusha. So the Rambam writes in his introduction to Pirush HaMishnayos that Moshe Rabbeinu Pashat physically showed Yidden how you do each mitzvah, how you make bikurim, how you separate truma, even though in the middle they didn't have these mitzvahs. Each one, Moshe showed them how to do them. So they had so many mitzvahs in 1 year. Once they left Har Sinai, there's no more mitzvahs. Finished. After the Jewish people left the mountain, for the rest of the 40 years, they spent their time learning the Torah. And their role, the Yidden's job in learning the Torah, was to find sources in the Torah for the mitzvahs that Moshe gave him. Moshe gave us three things. He gave us the luchas. He gave us the book, the scroll, the Sefer Torah. And by the way, there's a big machlekes in the Gemara whether Megillas Nemra, Nichteva, or Chasuma was the Sefer Torah written in pieces and then glued together at the end of the 40 years, or did Moshe wait till the end of the 40 years and he gave it to us in one big chunk? And the way Chassidus say it, they're both true. Megillas Nichteva, and then Nimsa Chasima, meaning they were given Parshas, the laws of Chakala, which is 3 psukim in Parsha Shlach. A little scroll, like you have a mezuzah, how do you do challah? So Moshe gave us the luchas edus, the Torah, and then he gave us mitzvah. Mitzvah means teresh bal peh. According to Rashi, in Parshas Mishpatim, vayichtev es sefer abris, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote min bereishis as matan Torah. He wrote it down. So they were carrying around the Megillah, they were carrying around the scroll, which was a part of what would later become the Sefer Torah in the 40th year, which Moshe Rabbeinu wrote. But the Yidden got it in pieces. But Moshe mitzvahs, according to the Rambam, he didn't teach us how to do it by speaking. He physically demonstrated it. That's why there's no machlekes about tefillin. That's why everybody knows what's an esrog, everybody knows what's a lulav, because Moshe physically showed them these physical artifacts, these physical things, so there can be no machlekes about it. We have a tradition that goes back to the very beginning of our religion. And the Yidden learned the Torah. Their job was to find in the book what Moshe told them orally. That was their role. The job of Yidden and the Midbar, all they did was study Torah. Because food they didn't have to acquire, drink they didn't have to acquire, even clothing they didn't have to acquire. It grew with them. It didn't wear out. They didn't have to change clothing like we do because they get rubbed out or the style and the fashion changes. They wore the same clothing for the duration of their lives. All they did was study Torah. What were they doing? I like to call it they were creating the Torah. They looked into the Chumash and they found sources for the mitzvahs that Moshe Rabbeinu gave them Baal Peh. But they knew once they leave Sinai, there's no more mitzvahs. So Rashi brings from the Gemara that the Jews were delighted. Chof Iyar, the 20th day in the month of Iyar, when the Jewish people left Har Sinai, they pulled out the beer and they said a celebration. No more mitzvahs. 6:13 is enough. No more mitzvahs. No more mitzvahs. Which is so painful. It's so painful. You know why it's painful? Because you got to say that the Yidden got it. They said Nasav and Ishma. They got it. They understood the deal. And in case you don't understand the deal, I'll repeat the deal to you, okay? We're an eternal nation. We're forever. But what makes us an eternal nation is our relationship with God, which is not fun. It's a lot more fun to be in the current culture, right? What's cool today in 2022 in America? I want to be part of that. Yeah. What was cool in France in, I don't know what, in 1825? I want to be a part of that. What's cool in Germany in 1780? I want to be a part of that. What's cool in Spain in 1350? What's cool any place in the world where people were very successful at any particular point in history? For the Jews to be who they are, they have to be involved in the uncoolest thing of all. Torah mitzvahs, a relationship with Hashem. And we have this deal that we made with him. And the deal that we made with him is he's not letting us go and we're not letting him go. So we're still here. We're the same people. As much as we kick and scream and rebel and fall out and fall back in, the definition of a Jew, which is that he's an eternal being because of his religion, because of his relationship with the Eibush, not because of his culture, not because he eats cholent or he drinks mashke or he wears a nice streimel or... We are who we are because of Yiddishkeit, because of Torah and Mitzvah. This is our eternity. This was the deal that we made. So the Yidden got it. This is what they signed on for. Hashem took them out of Mitzrayim, and He told them, Moshe said to Hashem, why are you doing this? Well, who are these people that you're helping out? And Hashem told Moshe, I'm helping them now because of what they're going to give me later. Hashem said to Moshe, I looked around the world, and of all the peoples, I chose these because these are the most likely to stick to me. Right? Jewish people are the most ornery, the Jewish people are the most rebellious, but the Jewish people are also the most stubborn. I'm Cheyedef Legreise, I'm Cheyedef Lemalyusa. The Eibishter says that if He's going to have an eternal nation, it's going to be these Chaleres, Yidden. And He took us out of Mitzrayim with this end, with this mindset, with this purpose, with this end. So we got it. We got it, but we are always complaining. We're always complaining. In Parsha Biha'alosecha, we complain 4 times in the matter of 6 weeks. Okay? The first time, it wasn't a complaint, it was a delight. Yeah? You know, imagine you went to the best fabrengen, and you had the best fabrengen, and you enjoyed it, and you sat all night, and you said l'chaim, and you sang, and you were inspired. And when the fabrengen said, oh, thank God it's over. That was the reaction. They spent a year minus 10 days at Har Sinai. They were close to Hashem like never before and never since. And they were happy to leave. Oh, thank God it's over. No more mitzvahs. Now let me just finish, okay? 2 days later, they complained again. What was the complaint now? They're moving too fast. Hashem had a plan to take them into Israel in 3 days. 3 days. They were supposed to take an 11-day walk in 3 days. They were laden. There were millions of people, including children, including animals, including elderly, and they're moving. Right. Why are we moving so quickly? And of course, I always tell you, this is the story. When you get involved with God directly, you got to be careful, you know. It's very similar to being very close to the Rebbe. You can't possibly be good enough. There's no way. When you're close to a power that's so great, the expectation is so high. You say, wait a minute, be nice to me, be gentle. And what's the answer? Want me to be nice to you? Okay, I'll put between me and you 4 or 5 screens. You want to be involved with me directly? That was the deal. The Eibishter was personally involved with the Jewish people. The Mutzah Mechaber was Moshe Rabbeinu. But the gift was unbelievable. What He was giving them was the greatest thing in the world. He was giving them God Himself. But the expectation was to stay on the wagon. And the wagon was moving at supersonic speed. It was moving at the speed of light. And they held on. The first day they kept quiet. The second day they kept quiet. The third day they said, enough! And here's the problem. They said enough when they were almost at the finish line. If they were traveling for 3 days and they protested on the third day, you have to presume that they were almost home. And they said, we can't. And there was a fire and people died. Don't ask. Sure. So the fire, people died. They rested.
They said they can't because they didn't want to go. They said they can't because they're actually affected and moving that fast.
They felt like they were being pushed. They felt like they were being pushed. It's like you join the Marines and you go to boot camp and you say to your sergeant, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. So the sergeant says, we have a contract. And if you break the contract, you're going to go to jail. The Yidden said, I'm sorry, God, we're not doing this. It's impossible. And they probably were right. They probably were right. But that was the whole point. The whole point was, if you're going to become the nation of God this quickly, you're going to have to quickly acclimate. It's like the story of what happened by Har Sinai, right? Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to speak to you and they're going to watch. The Jewish people said to Hashem, no, we want you to talk to us yourself. You want? Okay. So Hashem spoke to them themselves and they died. 1 time, 2 times. And finally, you know what? Let's not die anymore. Let's go back. The whole original design of Yetzias Mitzrayim was that the world's purpose is going to be fulfilled very, very fast. But what we needed was infinite faith. And we had infinite -1. Of that emunah. We broke each time. At the end, it was just so difficult. So there's a fire, people die. What happens next? The Erev Rav see an opportunity. And they start complaining. And it's such a stupid complaint. What are they complaining about? The mun. One of the, this is number 3 already, right? The first one was delighting in the fact that they left Har Sinai. The second one was, we're moving so quickly, we can't go anymore. Boom. That same day, after there was this fire, and Ksidim Shabbat the Gedolei Yisrael were burnt in the fire, the greatest rabbis were burnt in the fire for complaining about they were going too quickly. The Eidev Rav see an opportunity to turn the whole thing on its head, and they start complaining about the mun. Mun was a miraculous food. It came from heaven. The mun was not normal food. Food needs to be processed. It needs to be processed 2 or 3 times. Number 1, you have to plant it, and it has to grow. Number 2, you have to harvest it, and you have to prepare it, which means you have to cook it sometimes. And number 3, you have to digest it. The mun was not processed when it was created. The mun was not processed when it was prepared. And the mun wasn't even processed when it was swallowed. It went straight into your bones. The mun had one problem. You didn't go to the bathroom. That was the Erev Rav's problem. You know, the Jewish people are like, it says in Chassidus that the worst animal in the world is a yitush. I'm not sure what a yitush is. We call it a mosquito, a gnat. A yitush is an insect that doesn't excrete. It doesn't go to the bathroom. The only way it goes to the bathroom is when it dies. It doesn't excrete. Now, it's a law in nature that everything takes in and gives out. And philosophically, this law in nature that everything takes in and gives out is not only because there's waste. It's because everybody's a mashpia. You know, one person's garbage is another person's food. The elephant dung is a world to an insect, to a dung beetle. Everything is a mashpia and a makabel. The idea of being a makabel, not a mashpia, is unnatural and it's unholy. So the Erev Rav, oh, look at the mun. We don't go to the bathroom. Terrible, we're makabel and not mashpia. And they made a whole uprising. The Yidden asked for meat. They 30 days they were dying. 30 days. So a plan that was so idealistic in its design became so tragic in its reality. 30 days they're dying. 30 days they're dying. Okay, they stop dying. They move to another place. What happens the next day? Say that again. The mun was a glaze on the ground, yeah. It melted like cotton candy. And it was coriander. I don't know what coriander is. It's teeny tiny little seeds. Kizrag, God love it. It was teeny tiny little seeds. Yeah, and it was on the ground like a glaze, and you would scrape it off the ground.
So it was like slush?
Yes.
Like seeds, like I imagine sunflower seeds.
No, tiny little seeds.
Oh, small?
Called coriander. It actually says coriander.
Like
Like poppy seeds, tiny little seeds. And it was a thin glaze. And no matter how much you took a spoonful, you got an Asida Sefer. You took a truckload, you got an Asida Sefer. Everything about the mun was supernatural. And the Erev Rav found a way to protest. Now, what's Miriam's issue? She's criticizing Moshe Rabbeinu, her brother, her younger brother, for whom she sacrificed her life. Why? Because he separated from his wife. Why did he separate from his wife? Because Hashem told him to. But of course Miriam doesn't know that, and Miriam is saying, I'm also a Navi, I'm also a Naviya, and I'm B'derech Eretz, I'm married, I have a husband. Aaron HaKohen is also a Navi, he's B'derech Eretz, he has a wife. What's this Moshe Rabbeinu? Because she was standing next to Tzipoira. Now she says, she was standing next to Tzipoira when Moshe Rabbeinu was told to select the Shivim Zikanim, who were not Chachamim. They were not Sheikh, they were Nevi'im, they were prophets. So when Tzipoira hears that 70 men are going to become prophets, she claps her hand and says Rachmanos on their wives. And Tzipoira says, why? Why? You know what happened to me? We're living in the same house, but that's where it ends. We're in Precious. So Miriam becomes a Mitzaira. And they wait 7 days. And then they wait for Miriam's Tzara'as to heal. Miriam waited for Moshe Rabbeinu for 2 hours when he was put into the river Nile, and she's the one who proposed to Baspare to bring Yocheved, Ema Yolet, Moshe Rabbeinu's mother, to nurse him. So now the whole nation of Israel waits for 7 days for Miriam to be cured from her Tzara'as.
Was she still a water source at this point?
Of course, and she remained. She was she was Moshe Rabbeinu's older sister to Miriam to this day. So you have 4 tragedies in Parsha B'Alei. So 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The first is the oddest of all. That the Jews, it's not something bad, it's something not good. They were so happy to leave Har Sinai. Okay, enough mitzvahs. Yenug with the mitzvahs. Enough with the mitzvahs. 2 days later, they complain about how fast they're moving. And there's a big fire. And the Ketzinim, the greatest people died. The biggest tzaddikim passed away. in a fire. That same day started the Kibbutz HaTaava, which went on for 30 days. And then the day at the end of the 30 days, Miriam speaks Lashon HaRa, she becomes a Metzera, they wait 7 more days, and then they move on to another place, and then you have the wonderful story of the Meraglim, which of course is so exciting. It all happens in succession, in rapid succession. From Chaf Ir till Tisha B'Av, which is Chaf Ir, Chaf Siv, it's 3 months. From Chaf Ir till Tisha B'Av, we went from being a nation that's about to go into Israel to being a nation that's been divorced by God. He's not letting us into Eretz Yisrael. We have to wait 40 years. Our children are going to go. It culminates with the Meraglim. All of these events happen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so quickly, so rapidly. It's incredible. In my mind, I always say that from Tezvav Sivan, Ibtchon Tzara'as. Shivas B'Tammuz is a month away. Today's only Tezayin Sivan. Shivas B'Tammuz is in 31 days from today. But you learn in the Chumash there, the painful period is really from the 20th of Iyar, when they left Har Sinai, until Tisha B'Av, and then it all goes up. That's just how I experience it, that's how I feel it. But of course it's very hard to say that Chaf is the beginning of the disaster, because 15 days later you get the Torah and Shavuos. So it's, when you leave Har Sinai, from Yud Beis Sivan, from Tezvav Sivan, all of the negativity starts, all of the painful stuff starts. And it ends with Tisha B'Av. Anyway, what I wanted to talk to was this. Every complaint of the Yidden can be understood. I mean, the story with the mun and the slav is really sick. Really, Hashem gave you food that you don't have to prepare it, you don't have to harvest it, you don't even have to digest it, and they found a way to criticize it. They ate it. If you're smart enough and ingenious enough, you can find something negative in the most perfect positive. God gave you a gift, it's a heaven food, and they found a way of criticizing the mun. It's genius. It's genius. When you find something wrong, you'll always manage. It's not that difficult. Okay, but the first issue, they stood at Har Sinai, they had all of these mitzvahs, right? Every day we say in davening, we're saying it when we're wrapping up our tefillin, unfortunately, but okay, people who say Kaddish. Hashem wanted to give the Jewish people more zechusim, so He gave them more mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are not a burden. They're not supposed to be a burden. They're not a burden. They're opportunities to connect to God. That famous Yechidus, which has been shown so many times, and I've talked about it so many times, where there was a kid who grew up from, went to Yeshiva, spoke Yiddish in his first language, had a terrible experience, was beaten by his teachers. When he turned 18, he was done with God. And he marries a girl from California who didn't have his background, who didn't go to Yeshiva.
Jewish?
Of course Jewish. She was interested in Yiddishkeit, so he came with her to the Rebbe just to accompany her. He had no interest, she was interested. And he was told that if he doesn't write a note, he's not going to be let into the Rebbe's room. His wife went in with her father and him. And he said, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the Rebbe. I'm not interested in anything. I'm just married to her. But when they told him that he can't go into the Rebbe, he was pushed at a mensch. So he wrote a note, but the note was not personal, it wasn't intimate, it was just, if you have to write a note, he wrote in his note, if God is so great, why does He care so much about the details? And then he articulates it. If a meat spoon sees a milk pot, you have to bury it 6 feet under the ground. He describes in his childhood the very draconian perception that he got of halacha. This is bad, and this is wrong, and this is treif, and this has to be destroyed. And he had a very, very negative perception. And that's what he wrote in his note. If God is so great, why does He care so much about the details? So when they went into Yechidus, he saw right away that the Rebbe has Ruach HaKodesh. He was put in his place in the very beginning. The Rebbe answers his father-in-law, the Rebbe answers his wife, and then the Rebbe turns to him and says, I don't understand your question. So he figures the Rebbe doesn't understand English, so he repeats it to the Rebbe in Yiddish. He spoke Yiddish, he was a from boy. The Rebbe raises his right hand, like, I got it, I understand what you wrote. And the Rebbe says 3 words. The details are for us. That's all the Rebbe said. The details are for us. And a light went off in this man's head. He never understood. The Torah and mitzvahs is not so Hashem shouldn't kill us. It's us. Hashem loves us. He gave us mitzvahs so we have opportunities to get close to Him. Every time we do a mitzvah, we're better for it. We're better for it. It brings us closer to the Eibishter. And he said it was a changing moment in his life because he never thought of Yiddishkeit in those terms. He always thought of Yiddishkeit as a scorecard. There's an angry old guy up there with missing teeth and a beaked nose and a patch over one eye. He's got many, many wrinkles and a red bandana. He's angry and he's frustrated and he's nervous and he's letting it out on everybody else. You mess with me, I'm going to chop your hand off. This was the version of Yiddishkeit he got. And somebody tells him, what are you talking about? The Eibishter gave us mitzvah so we can have ways of coming close to him. The Rebbe said 3 words. The details are for us, but it registered with him. So here you have Yidden, they're walking away from Har Sinai, and there are too many details. I'll use the correct word. Too much orthodoxy, too much. You have to do it this way, you have to do it at this time, you have to do it in this position, According to Beishama, you want to read Shema, you got to lay down in the evening, you got to stand up in the morning. All of these details. And the Jews said, enough. Now the tragedy, of course, is the Yidden should have appreciated the fact that these details are for us. They're walking away from Har Sinai, and they're delighted in the fact that they have no more mitzvahs. So I want to give you a pshetel. You guys understand that. I didn't prepare this Parsha class. I'm impromptu. I have a plan. I want to teach about this. I want to prepare a class on this, but I never researched it. But this is my reactive insight. The Jewish people were struggling with the balance between the orthodoxy and the spirituality and the intimacy. Or to say it in words that are very plain and provocative, between their misnagid and their chassid. The misnagid is very frum, he's very precise, he's very exact, he knows the law. The chassid is very spiritual, he's interested in the personal relationship with the Eibishter. Those two things psychologically conflict. And it's a fact of life. I mean, you look at people. A person who's very, very exact and very, very precise is going to be drawn to a Litvische form of Yiddishkeit. A person who's very spiritual and very sensitive is going to be drawn to a Hasidic. I think it's a fact. Psychologically, if you go into the Litvische camp and the Hasidic camp, the personalities that are drawn, now if you're born into it, maybe you have different personality and then you'll struggle. But personality-wise, different kind of people are drawn to different kinds of Yiddishkeit. A Yiddishkeit, which is all about the details, is an exact person, it's a precise person, it's a controlling person. A person who's very into spirituality has a very difficult time with the details. And so much of our conflict is about the fact that each one says you're doing it wrong. Right? The Misnagid says to the Chassid, you forgot about the details. What about Zman Krishma? What about Zman Tefillah? And the Chassid says to the Misnagid, your Yiddishkeit has no life. Where's the spirituality? This is what was happening when the Jewish people were at Har Sinai. They were prophets. They were spiritual people. The age of prophecy lasts until 40 years into the second Beis HaMikdash. Their Judaism was primarily defined by their spiritual relationship to Eibishter. The orthodoxy, to them, were technicalities that was boxing them in. Every detail, every mitzvah, every nuance that they were given to do a mitzvah practically meant, I have to be concerned with technical detail, but I want to be about Neruchnius, I want to be about spirituality. And the Eibishter is saying, this is the only way to spirituality. You want spirituality, you want it to be correct, it has to be within these parameters. And this is one of the things that the Rebbe has made an ikir, right? You want to be related to God, you got to do mitzvahs. What's the trademark of Lubavitch? Mivtzoyim. Mivtzoyim, nothing spiritual about Mivtzoyim. You got to do a ritual. You want to be a Jew, put on tefillin. The spirituality is in the boxes and in the straps and in the putting your hand over your eyes and saying, Hear, O Israel. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. Because only way to the spirituality altogether, but specifically, the only way for the spirituality to be holy and not spirituality can very, very easily become unholy is the orthodoxy. So what I'm proposing is that the Yidden were happy to leave Har Sinai because there's no more mitzvahs. It wasn't that they had a problem with mitzvahs. They saw the mitzvahs as a conflict to their basic self-identity, which was that they were spiritual people. Every mitzvah was further refining, was further limiting how they could express their spirituality. And they didn't like it. Spirituality, you think, is best expressed when it's free. We have 100 conversations about this, right? Like, this is my cliche conversation, right? What's the opposite of organized religion? Personal religion. Why is it wrong? Why is personal religion not true? The answer is because it's not sustainable. Avraham Avinu had a personal relationship with God, And he didn't lose interest at the age of 175. In America, there are millions of young people who go through their God stage. Millions, huh? Of course. But they get over it. Why? It's very difficult. There's pleasure to be had, there's money to be made, there's power to be acquired, there's relationships to form, there's influence to have, and God gets lost in the shuffle. You must have orthodoxy. You have to have rules, mitzvahs. Now, from one perspective at least, those rules, that orthodoxy, that form is the framework through which you have a spiritual relationship with Hashem. But the two clearly conflict. The spiritual half of a person and the precise half of a person are very different. And in personality, some have this kind of personality, some have this kind of personality, and they don't really understand each other. Yidden were spiritual people. In other words, their first tendency, and that when they said to the Eibush the Nasa v'Nishma, they didn't say Nasa v'Nishma for tefillin. They said Nasa v'Nishma for a spiritual relationship with the Eibush. And then he says, okay, you want spirituality? Put on tefillin. I'll be happy to do it. Then 5 minutes later, and put up a mezuzah. 5 minutes after that, you can only eat kosher. And 5 minutes after that, a Shabbos, met the Kibbutz Avei, met the Parah Adumah, you name it. And that's 613 of those. So I'm not trying to say that this is the truth. It's just a proposition. It's a svara. It's a pshetel. This is what you do when you're not prepared. You understand? You make something up. I've been thinking about this for a while. But this is perhaps one of the ways of explaining the story. Yidden are happy to know that there's no more mitzvahs. Not because they were disappointed with their Nasav and Ishma. They weren't regretting the commitment they made. They were regretting how the Eibishter gave the terms to that commitment. He made that commitment so bound up in details. Every aspect of our lives, God mixes it. I remember going on a time with a bacher who was a bisla meshuganer. I couldn't do this, but he was a very chassidish bacher. He got into, we were bacher, he got into an argument with a girl about Taras HaMishpach. And she said to him, it's none of God's business. It's none of God's business. And basically, we were 16 or 17, we were so little. And the answer to that question is everything is God's business. There's no part of our life where God is not involved. There's no part of life God is not involved. And we say, wait a minute, this is too much. What's the answer? The answer is this is the medium for the intimacy, for the connection, for the ruchnius, for the spirituality. So this is just a way of spinning it. Yidden are happily saying, enough. Okay, we got enough enough Shulchan Aruch. And by the way, we've created a lot more halachas and a lot more minhagim and a lot more chumras and a lot more takanas and a lot more gezedas and a lot more who knows what mitzvahs that are born since then. And it's all for the same purpose. The details are for us. They create the framework that holds us. That our spirituality, our relationship with Hashem is actually based on humility, it's actually based on bittul, and it's actually based on holiness. But it's just a little detail in Parshas Biha'alosecha that we discussed. And now we will daven.